Well, doctors, team members, and I always like to add our lovely attendance of 143 who registered. I hope you can hear me loud and clear. I'm Dr. Atai. The objective of this night's webinar for the next 60 minutes, we're going to learn about the different products, not just necessarily from a perspective of what the products do, why do we use these, do we even need these in our practice, but understand how we can actually evaluate and create efficiencies in our practice, integrating the product lines that I've been able to talk about for the past now going on a few years now, almost three, implementing the techniques for the team, for your staff, in marketing your newfound love, which in my world is and has and always will be the clear aligner tooth movements, talking a little bit more in depth about some of the challenging movements that you've heard me multiple times talk about, which we face. Some of the disclosure is that I'm not employed by any dental company, nor any of my families own any stock or security interests. I do have interest in dental companies mentioned because I've done some product evaluation with Propel, Align Technology, as well as been compensated for consulting for these and sponsors of including Propel and some of the subject lines that you see. There'll be no photographing or videotaping or any kind of recording allowed during this particular next hour. Having that lovely legal disclosure, now let's get started. So I know a lot of you have asked me as I've been on the road lecturing, talking to doctors, talking to peers about, Dr. Tai, how is it that your practice, and I will very openly tell you, does so many aligners. We've done now just about 1.3 million in clear aligner treatments, as well as some of the world that comes in minor tooth movements. And we also do restorative. There's myself and an associate that I have in my practice. And the reality is I've been doing aligner treatments for going on 10 years now. Having 1,000 cases under your belt, still I feel like I'm still learning. Supporting a family, not just our immediate family, but an entire office, the ecosystem that goes with a team is important. So I've been able to be very blessed in having companies introduce me their newest techniques. And it's what we offer every day to our patients. What we want to avoid is the products that are here today and gone tomorrow, I like to call it. Some of the products that didn't quite suit in my practice as well. I came and I started with a company name of Laser Dental Center. Yes, lasers in the early 90s when I graduated dental school was it. And all of you have heard me as I preach on the road. I was going to put away the drill. I was going to be the laser dentist. And that technology, that product, was the product that I was going to invest in. And $450,000, I've had Erbium YAG, the diode, I have the Opus, the carbon, and I can probably cut a bone a lot better than anyone else. The problem is we still need to use the drill. We still need to do class 2s. So laser at the time was a good investment for marketing purposes, maybe disinfecting, getting under the gum line, debridement, but may not have been the best product in giving the standard of care which I want to give my patients by putting away the drill. And that statement every day haunts me because my patients say, hey, you're going to pick up the drill? So to this day, 20 years into practice, I got a product that didn't quite serve the purpose that it marketed and it told me it would. And that product is important. So what I like to discuss is that it's not necessarily the idea of remaining profitable that's important, but the standard of care. How do I have this delicate balance of having products that remain profitable in my practice and still deliver the standard of care? And it's a daily delicate balance, doctors and team members. I know this from our hygiene point of talking to patients about potential gum and loss of their bone, to talking about malocclusion and crooked teeth. And now the patient says, wait, you want to charge me $5,000 for what? Well, you only get one set of teeth. Teeth don't fix themselves. But that kind of conversation takes a little bit of time to understand, and it only comes with confidence of the product. A year, or 2, or 3, or 4 years ago, I was not as confident about the product lines in my practice because now I have over 4 years of experience in one particular subject line, which now happens to be implant technology or cone beam technology. The reality is, every day we're having a balance of economic success and standard of care as general practitioners. So the dental practice needs are important. What are some of the 4 top dental practice needs? Well, one important portion and understanding that the practice needs is understanding first-class delivery to satisfy my patients. Every one of us want to have and be the best. From dental school to now, we've been trained that my margin of crowns is a lot better than the doctor next door. Well, the reality is we have to deliver the best service, first-class service. And my patients, if they are happy, then they will refer additional patients. That's not a secret. It's not a crazy formula. It's an actual reality we have to do every day. Now, performance of what impacts the dental trends and what the market is different. For instance, we hear a lot in the world of cone beam, sleep apnea, and a lot of these other technologies that are now emerging in the dental world, while other doctors are still in bed with trying to figure out the fix and developer mode of how to convert into digital technology. So the market trends and what's being out there between the patients and their understanding and our office, we have to be up to date. We have to have the most updated product. And that most updated product is because the patients are aware of it. They Google it, they read it, their friends see it, and the doctor next door is going to have to be just as viable and important as you are because you're trying to stay ahead. So the control of costs become important. How do I control that cost? How do I become the number one first delivery class service to my patients and be able to keep up with the market and be able to keep up with the trends and control the costs so that I am economically successful so I can open my door because the rent is a fixed cost. Employees are fixed costs. We have to have these certain controls. Then, and only then, I want to increase my production year after year. What we did this year, I want to grow a little bit more next year. And how do I continue that growth and continue that path of growing again and again and again every year? So we have to have new patients. And this continuous need of new patients is where the formula breaks. Because the reality is, doctors, the need for new patients doesn't necessarily mean you're going to increase your year over year. It doesn't mean you're going to control costs. How many times have we run lost leaders or run an advertisement, or I see it for Zoom, or I see a brand new patient cleaning, and we run these ads for $30, $40, $50, and they come in, patients, and don't buy what we want them to buy, which is a treatment plan to save their teeth because teeth don't fix themselves. What we do instead is we go and try to market. And there's the problem. What if we kept the existing patients? What if my 6,000 patient pool all showed up? I would implode. But out of 6,000, I may have 800 that are active, or maybe 1,000 that are really coming in for their cleanings and showing up. They're not going to another dental office. They're just not coming in. How do I get that? How do I bring in the dental economics of 101 and learning the 4 Ps, as I had learned back in business school, which is understanding for you to gain those 4 key points, you need to have and implement the 4 Ps. Number 1, product. The product is important. What is the product that you are going to be using in your practice on these consumers? Consumers being our patients. The price. Price is important. How much is it going to cost for you to implement? What is the scenario where we have the promotions? Are we going to promote it? Is the company who's giving me the product going to promote it? And where is that going to be? In my office? Virtual? Do we have online somewhere? So the reality, the brand name and functionality and the quality of that product is important. So the company has to be trusted who delivers that. Then I can trust the company, my team can trust, and my patients will trust me. We will have to understand that costs are important. And most importantly, continuing that trend, the promotion. And how do I now market this? How do my patients pay as well as I promote? Will the company help me implement this into my business in location and have some sort of operational system that I can now follow up? So these 4 Ps is what we're going to talk about tonight. We're going to talk about not just the product, but understanding to place, promote, and price properly. So we can be economically successful and have, most importantly, stand of care. So in minor tooth movements, in my practice, has been a cornerstone of the growth of my practice. Not the lasers, not the laser dentistry. And I'll be very upfront and telling you, it helps in getting the patients in to help. But at the end of the day, malocclusions and correcting patients' bite into proper occlusion has helped my office. And that has become a big passion of mine. Clear aligners or wire and brackets. As I like to always endorse the fact of digital versus analog. Whichever you choose, in my world, in my practice, I've taken minor tooth movements such as this case that we see at your screen with the crowding of the lower anterior, overjet that's got a little bit of a deep bite, not much, but the canine's completely rotated and in crossbite. This particular case is a $5,500 case. But the reality is, I was able to give it to the patient for less than that and still remain profitable. And I was able to cut away an extra $1,000 from my patient, but gain the revenue of my chair time and finish this case in less than 6 months. Now, I was able to get the teeth ready for veneer and for some sort of restorative, which, by the way, a good friend of mine in Oregon, my patient moved, and Dr. Ty Etheridge did the restorative on him and was amazed that I was able to do this in less than 6 months. We've talked about this case in prior webinars, but we've never broke down the idea of how do we incorporate this pricing structure so that way we stay profitable. Looking at these patients, they've got something that is beyond their teeth, neck up. I've always talked about that in order for you to deliver first class to your patients, you've got to understand the products you bring to your practice. And I understand that sometimes with clear aligner treatment and with sometimes even Invisalign, we've got some hiccups that patients do not get what the computer software telling us that they're going to get. And now we've got delays. We've got scenario with additional aligners. And our name is tied to that. Our business card is the smiles of the patients that are smiling. They're our billboard. Now, the billboard to our office are their teeth. And their teeth, we're trying to move them. And heaven forbid if something goes awry and the teeth doesn't move. We understand that there is something called bone, and teeth are in bone. And all of you listening understand that there are densities of bone. But do our patients understand that? Do our patients understand that it's not magic by changing these plastic or clear aligners or even Invisalign treatments that teeth move? Putting on a bigger attachment, putting on a bigger bracket doesn't necessarily help move the tooth. But what happens? Our patients get upset that their teeth quite didn't move because they see our emotion and our factors of, it's been a year and I just don't see much change. Well, that becomes a big question. Is it the product? I just don't like this product. I don't want using it. It doesn't work for me. 160,000 dentists, and we've got, 15, 20,000 that know about movements? How many of us are really using this? The statistics are there. The reality is chair-side challenges during treatment reflect poorly on us. But is it really the product? Is that open space that I see on that lateral, is that really the product? Is it because that our lower teeth that were supposed to move didn't quite move? Did the aligner do its work? It must be the aligner. Well, no, the reality is it started all in the very front tooth, the cuspid that didn't rotate. And that is in bone. And if the bone doesn't allow the tooth to move, the tooth will not move no matter what you put on it. And this is a reality where doctors and patients start to say the product doesn't work. That's not the case. So let's talk about the products. Let's talk about how we can navigate through some of the challenges of minor tooth movements, become profitable, and be able to have not only advice of the brand name, but the functionality and the quality that we want to deliver. So Propel was introduced to me, and all of you know now that it came out as best of class technology. A few years in a row, and Dr. Gordon Christensen even reported that 93% of clinicians found Propel's accelerated series drivers to be excellent. Okay, well, let me tell you firsthand how I feel. If you're planning on moving teeth, you're going to have some challenges. If you want to remove those challenges, you're going to have to invest in a different product as well. But I don't want it to be a lot. I want it to gain profitability. And I want to keep track with what's happening where in the trend today, talking about manual osteoperforation, what does that mean? What the heck is that? Oh my gosh, I'm scared. Those of you who are newcomers to the world of Propel, yes, there is going to be a little bit of waking up of the bone. And yes, there'll be, and I tell my patients, and you'll hear me talk about the process. Hey, patient, the first time I see you, you and I are not going to be friends. Right after if they collect their deposit and they come back and we finish the records and we sent in their lovely little ClinCheck and they come in and we're going to go deliver, I tell them that visit you will not like me. I tell you why, patient. Because you are going to have jackets on your teeth. Those are called attachments. We're going to put your teeth on a diet. They've been fat for too long. That's putting a little IPR in between your teeth. And we're going to wake up the bone. We're going to poke the bone and wake it up. Why? Because your teeth are in bone and we need to get the bone to cooperate. And in 6 weeks, you're going to see your teeth moving and you're going to send me a referral. Because in 6 weeks, you're going to be a lot more advanced and further along than anyone else that if anyone started in your family or your friends with a different dentist, because the products we use in our practice effectively move teeth. That's it. It's a simple explanation. And the simple explanation to you doctors is that in orthodontics, the rate that bone remodels is determined on a patient's treatment time. Now, Align Technology has announced 7-day change. That's awesome. I love the 7-day change. And prior to Align's announcement, I was actually doing 5-day changes with some of my acceleration treatments that I was giving using Propel. So one of the Propel devices, the accelerator, which you'll see, it stimulates the cytokine activity because you are creating a manual osteoperforation. That does not mean you're going to tuberculate of bone and poking the root and going through and through. You're actually incorporating the patient's own body biology by creating as we know, bone is resorption, as happens on a daily basis, and molding, and this happens every day. All we're doing is increasing that cellular activity by simply creating a small little pin into the bone and the periosteum area of the bone. We're now allowing that cellular activity to get faster and faster, and the bone starts to remodel. And you start to form brand new bone. And in fact, not only are you able to get this tooth movement faster and change the aligners, even if you like sooner than 7 days, but you get 0 to no root resorption on teeth. Because root resorption is a factor of bone being dense and a lot of torque being put on the coronal part of the tooth. And the root is bouncing against the mineralized portion of the bone. Well, in this case, we're moving the bone along with the tooth. New fibers are growing. So by creating an inflammatory process, the cytokine activity starts and the rate of bone remodeling is increased, and we're allowed to keep that bone density lower, as I call it in layman's terms to my patient. I'm making your bone like Jello temporarily. And this lasts anywhere between 10 to 12 weeks. And those newcomers to this process, doctors, understand this has been done for many, many years, over 20 years. They call it corticotomy, piezosurgery, even osseous type scenarios. The reality is the microperforation, the small perforation we call MOPS, is minimal invasive. And there's no downtime to the patient. This is a product. This is a product that's being used in my practice. Now, there's single-use products. There's reusable ones. There's even the electric one, the Power Driver one. All of these product lines, I recommend you try. In my practice, I started with the accelerator and I moved myself to the reusable, and now I have the Power Driver. And it's very simple. You basically, have the patient rinse with some chlorhexidine, keep area. You can either anesthetize using some lidocaine or infiltration. You can even use the profound topical. All of these treatments, most of you know about, but most importantly, the ones that the people who are just joining us, you're only going 1 or 2 treatments at max. Most of these patients who have 20 to 24 aligners, you're really doing 1 treatment. You're not perforating them or hitting their bone every 2 weeks or every week. I've heard that. I get emails after webinars saying, Dr. Ty, how many times do I have to do this? Once during the whole course of the treatment, or maximum twice if the case is very complex or you've got crowding or spacing that's greater than 6 millimeters. The reality is that osteoclastic response is in that diameter about 4 to 6 millimeters. So you need maybe 1 or 2 perforations in between the roots of the teeth. That's it. And if you have to repeat this process, it's probably best to do it after the first 12 weeks. Why? Because the first 10 to 12 trays, if we're changing them every week, guess what's happening? All the torque movements are being done. And this is what it looks like. The reality is I'm going in just in the areas of where that's a lidocaine shot that I'm showing you. I numb this patient. You can see a little bit of blanching. Those are all lidocaine shots. I don't go all the way up to the root area only because of the vestibular area. Sometimes you get a little bit of bleeding. But this is right after we perforated at the attached gingiva level to the coronal portions and just before the free gingiva. That's my sweet spot in hitting these patients. Right? Just 3 twists and I'm done. Now you've seen this process on potential videos. Patients do not feel anything other than a little pressure on their bone. Predominantly, I would recommend those of you who are familiar with the ClinCheck, just know premolar to premolar is my ideal locations because I'm uprighting premolars, I'm rotating canines. That's pretty much my sights. Between 3 to 5 millimeters, I'm usually at the 3 millimeter depth. I don't go beyond 3 millimeters. Sometimes on the molar parts, you can go 5 millimeters. All of these are very simple, very easy patterns that you can follow. So I don't want to get too clinical because I want to get into the idea of the ROI, but look at some of these areas. This patient's missing a bicuspid. So we were able to, I just did the molar because I was uprighting the molar and I was going to distalize a bit. This particular patient was published because she had a class 2, a severe class 2. I did the entire case with no rubber bands. You can see the past webinars on that and some of the publications on Dentistry Today, what was on the cover of the magazine. So the technique I like to propose Propel. My patient's already accepted. I always like to show the patient that we are taking a sterile bag. The device is a device which is simply, as you can well see, that's the numbers on it. We're going to go ahead and set it at 3 millimeter. And I always like to use the Vaseline and kind of just put it so on the lips of the patient and along the device itself. So let's go ahead and see how the device will work. We're actually going to start with the number 27 area. Small little pressure. Simply, as you can see, we're in. That's typically 3 twists and back. That's as simple as the device. How did we do? Excellent. Excellent, the patient said. And those of you who've seen this multiple times, I love watching it. It's my assistant, Nadia, who had Propel done with Invisalign. It was her first time. You saw her face was weary. And that was it. We did hers with a topical. And very simply, we just went in, 3 twists, and it was done. It was literally my second try with the accelerator. There's a reusable one. There's now the Power Driver, and all of these accelerators. And let me show you the product line that I'm very fond of with the Power Driver. So our lovely doctor here, who's a volunteer, Lauren, has actually had Propel with the hand device, and now she's going to have it with the Power Driver, and she's going to tell us her experience. So we're just going to go through here. I've already turned it on, and you can just go ahead and put right on. You feel a little pressure? Okay, and I'm already in the bone. I'm going to reverse it. And I reverse that. So when you start to look, it's that simple. But the unknown is difficult. How do I do this? The most important part, don't say how. All of you know how to do crowns, all of you know how to do fillings. This is beyond easy. Just make sure you give the proper post-treatment. No Motrin, no ibuprofen, Tylenol only. Because what happens is you want the inflammatory process to increase. You want some pain on those aligners as they're moving teeth. And they don't have any pain until they change the aligner. It's not that they have pain from the perforation, but typically that first day or two, as the aligner is putting the pressure, patients are wanting to go get some sort of Aleve or Advil. Do not give them that. They can take some Tylenol, and that's it. There's a lot of benefits. Minimal invasive. It can be used with aligners or braces, and most importantly, there is no recovery time. None needed. And the doctor, you control it. It saves time. I can now move forward with confidently talking about a product. Because what the fact is that there are products in the market that allow teeth and aligners to work effectively together. In my world, the V Pro is the best aligner seater. It's got high frequency vibration and it's cheap. It allows me to clear up any kind of teeth that are not quite moving or the aligner that's not fitting, and I simply have the patient wear it 5 minutes a day, and it seats the aligner down. Because what are your options? Really, the reality is your first option is to remove all the attachments, take new photos, take impressions or scan a patient, and you've got downtime till a new set of trays are made. Or those of you doctors who are doing wire and brackets, there's a little downtime. And I have to now start out over again. Or if I have a little bit of teeth that's not fitted into the aligner, it's much better than a Chewy. I can have them continue with the aligner seater. I can have them continue with getting these teeth into right fit with the aligner. And given that you give a little bit of night space and make sure sometimes teeth are not maybe moving because they have heavy contacts. So those doctors, if you're planning on not doing any interproximation, check it with the floss. Make sure interproximally you have light or at least minimal contact between teeth. And 5 minutes a day, it avoids me having to go through that 4-week downtime. I want to keep the teeth moving. And it's important because it allows me to have some sort of a summary of usage. I get to actually see the patient wearing it. I get data, and that artificial intelligence is valuable being sent to me. I get to see it, and if the patient's cycling up or not, or if the patient's actually using it. So there's a lot of information that I gain in having this particular product, and it gives my patient and me a little bit of comfort that, hey, you're doing a great job wearing it. You're doing a good job using this device and making sure that the aligner seats well. So product line itself is one thing. Now we know about the accelerators. We know about the potential use of automating it. We know about a little bit of vibration that we can seat the aligners in and the power drivers. But how and where the promotion? One of the things we talked about, public awareness. Is the public aware of this? Well, guess what? I think so, because there's been a lot of data and information given just from the science world where it's been informative, researched, and now publicized, talking about MOPS, talking about the actual studies of having patients without the MOPS, the perforation technique, versus having it done. And if you see on the right side versus the left side, you can really see on the canine, on that cuspid, that there was a lot of movement in a very short amount of time versus not having that inflammatory process begin, not having the MOPS begin. So the space, you can clearly see, has been from one side to the other. There's been a lot more movements where there was MOPS incorporated with the ortho treatment. So that kind of publication gets publicized. And most importantly, you're able to talk a little bit more rather than have this marketing come to you. You go to your patient with facts, with confidence. But here's what we do as doctors. What we say is, you know what? I'm going to save some money, and I'm going to go ahead and use a little bit of burr, and it's the same thing. I'm going to create that perforation. Now, here's what you're going to do with anything else. If you use a burr or some other stuff, you're actually removing bone. Now, you're taking away and scooping out bone that patient needs. We're talking about creating stimulation. We're talking about creating a little punch. We're not talking about, I'm sorry, not the punch, a microperforation. We're not trying to create a copious area to potentially have necrosis. That's the reality of it. Now, there's been multiple studies done with aligner treatments, but I myself have been published multiple times on having these cases in minimal time, 6 months or less. And the reality is lower crowding, uprighting is simple. So if I use a case that are 10 aligners or less, I want to stay on track, but I don't. And sometimes the bone's in the way. And now I got to pay more money because now I'm not happy with the product. So sometimes you need to discuss with your patients why it's ideal to stay on track. And this conversation piece comes from before and after photos every day in my practice. Those of you who don't have them, I will give you a link that you can go download my photos. You can use them. I don't mind. It's reality is you want to stay for 9 months of treatment, having 1 or 2 perforations. This patient was excited and sent me more patients. His wife is now doing the treatment. And by the way, she's already done. So some of these cases that you see are cases that you may think that I don't think the clear aligner would work. I need wire and brackets. Well, in my practice, I do not know how to do wire and brackets. Every one of my cases, just about 1,000 cases now, have been done with clear aligner treatments using Invisalign. Every one of my cases have been done using clear aligners with Invisalign. That's just about 1,000 cases. So price is important. What is it that I'm paying? How do I implement? How do I do this where, okay, Dr. Tai, I got it. All right, we got it. But how much does it cost? Because what did this patient pay? Okay, well, let me tell you, this patient was a military patient, and I was very lucky because they can't have wire and brackets when they're active duty. So he actually was looking for an Invisalign doctor, and he wanted to have faster treatment done. And this was before Align announced their 7-day aligner change. I was changing them in 5. But whether you do 7, 5, or 3 days, you still have bone. This is a very crowded 6 millimeters plus of crowding, rotations, and overjets that go beyond the parameters of a simple case. He found me online, and the product, which I'm going to talk to you about that I use, was Propel. And he went on the Propel site and found the doctor in the doctor locator, which I'm going to show you in a minute. And he came, says, hey, can you get my teeth done in less than a year? Now, how many of our patients are that wise? I don't know. The market's catching up. Google's doing a great job. But here's my one, and I have another 30 to show you, just like this one. So the reality was, not only did I say, yes, I can do it, but I can price it properly. Because now he knows value. He knows how much it should cost. And I have to have a strategy in deployment for my practice. So the third P, which is the biggest one, is price. What pricing are we buying? What pricing are we selling? How are we implementing? Because if I have a scenario where I'm going to charge my patient, right? And I'll give you 3 different scenarios in all around the US. I'll give you the first scenario from $5,200. I'm going to go all the way down to $4,500. If you're at a $5,200 fee, I use Invisalign as my clear aligner treatment for 18 months, then my revenue should be per visit about $300 maximum. Well, why do you say that, Dr. Tai? Well, because what's the chair time worth for me? Am I going to do a filling or a crown, or am I going to do Invisalign? I'm planning on doing these cases so I can do and have a passive income coming in and have the products do its job. I'm paying a lab bill to Align. I'm paying about $120, $140 for Propel per unit, which I'll get into in just a minute. And I don't want, in that particular price line, to have a negative. I have to have a positive. Now, how is it a positive? I want to decrease the amount of visits. I want to be able to decrease the visit. I want to get that 18 months and shorten it out. How do I do that? Well, you have to work on the bone and have the patient in that accelerated change. Most of my changes nowadays are 5 days. not 7. 7 is good, but what happens if you have a hiccup or the tooth doesn't track? Now I've got to go through with my VPRO. I've got to go through and make sure the aligners are seated. That's a $200 or $300 to the patient. I'm sorry, to me, and to the patient, it's about $400 or $500. And I'll show you how I price that to my patients. But if I reduce my pricing, can I bring more patients in? I know a doctor who does all Invisalign cases for $3,500. And you're like, oh my God, there's no profit in that, $3,500. Here's his strategy. He propels every patient. He gives it at $3,500. He keeps the restorative and the crowns, and the patients are there in and out less than a year. Chair time, he saved money, but guess what he's done? He's increased his revenue per visit because he's getting more volume. By the way, this doctor has over 17 offices now. 4 years, 17 offices. So he must be doing something right. I know some of you are sitting there shaking your head. I would never do that. I understand. But when I tell you what he makes annually, which is in the millions and way beyond the 10 or 15 millions, we're talking in the 30 millions, then there's a formula there. So how do we use these tools? I don't like the idea of selling lasers to my patients because at the end, I still have costs. I still have crown, lab, and filling, and the drill, the maintenance of the drill, updating the sterilization for that. It's not that I'm just using the laser, I'm done. In this particular case, I have 2 product lines. And these 2 product lines are not my constant costs, which are the rent and the constant costs that we have every day, but rather just the product lines itself. So when you start to look at you cutting back the number of visits, in the orthodontic practice, they sometimes say, well, I don't want to be done faster. I want to be done, so that the patient's payments. What if the patient's on a 24 months payments? Well, the reality is I've never had a patient not pay me for finishing faster, ever. The only reason patients have ever not paid me, which happened to me once or twice in my lifetime, and I'm sure what's happened to some of you, is because they have not been happy. They were maybe not treated well, or they didn't feel special. It's not because they're mad at us because we finished our work faster. When does that happen? Never. As a matter of fact, they send you more patients and they're happier. So even if you drop it to a $4,500 pricing, which I know some of you doctors in the West Coast area have that, it doesn't matter because you're still increasing your revenue by cutting back and the actual number of visits. So when you start to look at these examples, you start to see 106% with the Propel Incorporated. Now, how do I figure that? Let's continue. First and foremost, some of you may or may not know, and some of the clinicians have talked about the alveoplasty without extraction of teeth. Great. Some of you may know that there's codes that you're not really moving, you're not really extracting teeth, but you're moving the bone. Well, that's not what that means. What this means is that I tell the insurance very clearly that I'm not doing a flap. I'm creating an alveoplasty without extraction of teeth per quadrant. My quadrant fee is anywhere between $300 to $600, depending on how many teeth are involved. And I'm using the Propel device. I tell them using Propel because I'm not telling them I cut a flap, I shaved the bone, and then I shut the flap. No, this is a very minimal invasive technique, just like Arestin. If you recall, some of you with Arestin code, there wasn't such a thing as an Arestin code. There was antimicrobial underneath the gum line, and there was a code for that. Now it's called the Arestin code. So the same thing, the Propel is something that I very clearly tell my dental insurance. And in my patients, I have 2-tier level pricing. So if my patient comes in and they have crowding that is greater than 6 millimeters of crowding, or they have crowding that's less than 6 millimeters of crowding, I have 2 different fee structures. And I can decide if at the pricing of having an advanced case treatment, and I base it on the patient's own crowding, which is the amount of teeth movements that are involved. And some of you who've taken my course before, I've also loaded this on Atai.com. I call it the Atai 246 rule. If I have 6 millimeters of crowding or more, this is a certain fee, or I have crowding of 6 millimeters or less. It's not really based on, hey, this is going to be 24 months or it's going to be 12 months. Because most of my cases, when I tell the insurance very transparently, I tell them, hey, man, I'm probably going to be a year or less. So, I don't know what you want to do. Some insurance companies don't pay me for a full 12 months. I understand. But I have been very clear with the patient that that has been a case where it's more of a what? That's a case where it's more of a shorter treatment time, like your express cases. Okay. Now, going back to this, I also have a payment option form. I actually go through and give my patients the leveled treatment. So if they're level 1, as you saw earlier, they're more advanced case, or level 2, I can make a decision. Do I want to include or incorporate, if the patient's paying me $5,400, an additional treatment for them with Propel? Or a liner seater, or do I want to charge them? So I've also given this where it's a downloadable format for you in Word document. So you can have it where if they're level 1, I write the price. I can decide the $500, whether we do the Propel, the aligner seater, it doesn't matter. That's just to get your teeth moving. It's part of our treatment. As well as the retainers. Some of you doctors I know may want to throw in the retainers. That's fine. So minus what the insurance will pay us if they have any kind of dental orthodontic insurance or not, as well as that's where the discount comes in. That $500 is for if you want to throw in the retainers or throw in one of the Propels. Because remember, the Propel unit, I don't pay more than 120, 140 bucks max. So, some patients may or may not have flex spending that they want to use, but I'm very clear on what my price is going to be. If the insurance didn't cover it, then it'll be additional revenue for the office, or additional fees that the patient has to pay to the office, or we can now put them on some sort of a monthly program. And I've given you that number for most of my patients that I go ahead and if they don't get accepted on the Care Credit or some of the other programs, they can actually go through and I will go ahead and give them 200, 300, whatever payment they want. I use a program that allows them to continually make their payments without me having to chase my patients. So again, I've given multiple scenarios because I stay competitive with the doctor who is next door, with the doctor who's down the street, with you, some of you listening. I'm giving you first-class treatment, and I'm giving you pricing that's just about the same as everyone else. Can you stay profitable, Dr. Ty? I'm not convinced that you can stay profitable. Let's talk about that. The profit is tied into implementation, not necessarily where your business is located. Whether you're in the Beverly Hills area or New York in the Fifth Avenue, it does not matter. I've seen actually most offices that are not in the higher sections or a higher end, and they're doing well. So it's not the place, it's where you land, where you are in patients looking for you. That's the key. Because to me, the right partner is promoting my practice and not charging me. If I buy a product from you, you promote me to your patients, to your clinical studies that you put out. Promote me, and that is the differentiation that I like. I do that with Invisalign, I do that with Propel, and any other product that I'm going to go into business with. Can my patients be gained access to your site? Or am I going to get new patients from your site to me? There's the key. That's what I really want, because the marketing aspect of it. And, okay, I can go spend all this money with direct brochures and flyers and website content. Man, who's going to come and put that together? That's going to extra cost. Now I got to go figure out the verbiage and how do I market it on my website. Simple. And I go back to my purchase of the lasers. When I bought the lasers, I had to pay 25 cents for each flyer and pamphlet that I had to give. Still to date, I have to buy those brochures. The right partner is giving me and helping me and giving me templates, referral letters, brochures, posters, direct patient marketing tools. This helps me because my website content can now be something that I can now talk to my patients about. I'm not going to go invent and recreate the wheel. I need to see some cases. I need my patients to see it. Which one do you have? Which one of these teeth do you have? I love this pamphlet. I love this pamphlet. I use it every day. And guess what? We have systems, products, process So the patient for $500, which what is it? For your entire Invisalign treatment and the Propel included for $5,500, that is $17. Just do the math here. That's $17 on your teeth per day. Geez, that's something you can do. What patient says no? Because teeth don't fix themselves. And I'm going to do this in 20 or 24 weeks or less. And I can potentially get you done before your big day or your holiday. And this is where now you have a point of reference and conversation because you have visual aids that you can market. And it's important because in the social media today, I talk once in a while, and I have my youngest front office, Amanda, and she says, okay, she puts a little post or puts a little video, and I use the video animation tools and accelerated tools, and I see other doctors who've been successful with product implementation have done the same thing. So the secret is not a secret. The success is the company proper partnership with the proper product. If the product works, I have happier patients, and guess what? I'm going to market that. And it's important, doctors, for you to understand that I say this passionately because I've been there. I've been where I cannot figure out how to implement even a simple thing. I have digital radiography, and patients still ask me, am I going to get radiated? Is there radiation? As they put their phone to their ear and they take their other phone to the other ear. And the reality is, and they stand in the sunlight, God knows how long. The reality is, that's a learning tool that I love. Same. Are you going to hurt my bone? What's going to happen? Those kinds of questions, I have confidence. And these webinars are now based for you to have the same confidence. Because understanding the process from the product and what to do, getting the team on board and the training and the right partner, guess what? That happened. That happened to me on day one. And I wanted to make sure that I understand everything about the product line. I wanted to understand everything that my patients can learn from me. Then, talking about promotion. I want to be promoted. I need that content right away so I can put it into my practice. Implement tomorrow. And how do I get the pricing? Are you able to give me some volume discounts? If I buy, am I going to pay one at a time? How does that work? Well, listen, you're going to want to get the best pricing, but I have to go back to my patients with it as well. So that's important for me. And in my quarterly ROI, am I growing? Am I able to continue this? Because here's what ends up happening. We want to be successful. And all this entire process is built in my practice by the right partner and product lines. So I wanted to leave some time because I know a lot of you may have questions. And this is the part where I really like the Q&A portion. I've left a few minutes to make sure that we go over it because I want to kind of recap in some of the questions that I've been seeing light up on the message board, answer your questions, and then go through and kind of recap the entire process for you. So with your permission, what I like to do is kind of go through. If you want to add your additional question. Sorry, one of you guys said lost sound. So I will go ahead and get the sound going. So he says, please provide me with the link before and after photos. So one of the links we have, obviously I gave you the Propel, they have the brochures, but also on my own link, atai.com, you can go on there. I have before and afters. I have class 1, class 2, and class 3 photos that you can use. I also have a downloadable hygiene form that it shows the patient's crowding, spacing, and where I use the Propel and how it's used. So you can also download that and have fun with it. There's no expense or charge to you. You can have it, enjoy it, but it's a good teaching tool. I always tell in my lectures, laminate that because, you want to get a color print of it, and we always mess it up. So I just, you can print it, laminate it, and it could show you where the patient's crowding was and where the actual perforations were performed, what the final, finishes. In terms of can you avoid elastic and buttons and carriers. Well, so listen, when a question is asked of me, can you avoid elastics and can you avoid any kind of buttons? The answer is, look, I haven't used elastics for class twos. I use IPR. You're going to need time, space, pressure. Problem is, in this particular case, he's a class one. The class two case that I was talking about, if you go back in the past webinars, I've talked about the class two. Shannon is her patient name. Again, she was on the cover of the Dentistry Today magazine that they featured. The reality is you have to gain that reclining back of the upper arch if it's a class two from somewhere. So rubber bands work. It's not a matter of avoiding it. It's a matter of predictable movements. So I think the question is, do we need buttons? Do we need carriers? Do we need elastics? Depending on the severity of the case, you may, but it may not be as much. For instance, I do a lot of teen cases now. And some of these teen cases, maybe with one perforation around those canines to just bring them down out of the palatal area, man, that makes a big difference when they have a chain. It just drops right down. My son right now, who's going through ortho with me, is going to be my next case. So the reality is it's more predictable. I don't know if I like to use the word avoiding the elastics or buttons, but rather just simply making it easier. And your ROI grows because of that. Another question, how do we know how quickly we may change aligners after Propel? Which movements dictate speed? Good question. So we talked about the idea of tooth movements, and we talked about the Aligns protocol right now is changing the aligners every week, right? Or as doctors see fit, basically. The reality is that when you Propel at the very initial stage, meaning that the velocity of movement for Align is consistent. There's no change of velocity there, meaning that 0.25 millimeters of movement's happening on every aligner, whether you're rotating or proclining or rounding out, the velocity is the same. But when you work on these perforations, when you start to work on the density of bone, what you're really doing is you're allowing that cellular activity to increase. So the bone, right away, that traumatic, picture, if you will, an implant, right? You're going to do an extraction and place an implant. When you pull that tooth out, you're waiting 3 to 4 months before you place an implant, if it's not an immediate one, right? Why? Because you're waiting for that bone to get dense again. That takes 12 to 14 weeks. That cytokine activity, that reparative activity is happening in that 12 weeks. So as soon as you create that perforation, the cellular activity is starting right away. So in my world, I'm changing my aligners every 5 days on all patients that have been propelled. On all. It's a universal standard for my practice. Now, I know some orthodontists are changing 3 days, meaning that they propel the patient, they mop, and then they have the patients change every 3 days. Some of those scenarios are a little bit, in my world, too fast because I'm lecturing and it breaks my office when I bring the patient back every week. So I bring my patients, I give them 5 aligners, 5 weeks, done. Right? And I bring them back every 5 weeks. I check IPR, interproximation, check the contact points, make sure that there's no collision as teeth are moving. So that's how we dictate our speed of movement, is based on the science of acceleration of the cellular activity. Okay? Do you use Express on the now light option at reduced fees, or do you just use the 2 fees tier to you? Well, Dr. Stephen, let me tell you, you are a brilliant man. I don't know if you saw, I endorsed the Invisalign Lite. My name is on there, and I truly believe Align finally got it right. What the difference between Invisalign Lite and Invisalign Express is this. Express is you get 10 aligners. The movements are the same for 3 millimeters of crowding or less. Meaning if the patient has an overlap of teeth less than 3 millimeters, they get a set of 10 aligners, and that's it. It's a reduced fee. I think it's $900 or so, 900 some odd dollars, $950. I don't know exactly, $998 by the time they're done with us with tax. The reality is that if I need a refinement or if I need some additional aligners, it's going to cost me a bit more. I used Propel religiously on my Express cases because there was no refinement. So I wanted to finish. But remember, I told you 3 millimeters or less. Now, when the Invisalign Lite was just launched recently, as early as I think it was about a week and a half ago, 2 weeks ago, guess what? Now you get 14 aligners with one additional, the old terminology was refinement, the new terminology is additional aligners. So now I still propel them, but I still have them change once every 5 days, just so you know, because the velocity of movement has not changed. It's just I can get up to 4 millimeters or 4.5 millimeters of crowding now. I can treat almost up to 4.5 millimeters of crowding, and I have a refinement in case it didn't quite work. I hope that answers your question. Dr. Matthew, let's see. What software company are you using for patient reviews? So this is great. Weave, and they're going to get a free endorsement right now. So Weave is W-E-W. I think it says Go Weave. And those of you who don't know the Weave company, you can kind of look it up. But I use them where the software is integrated with my phone system. They give me a free phone system. They don't charge me. It's a couple of $100 a month where as soon as a patient calls, their entire pull from the software used, whether it's Dentrix or Eaglesoft, pops up. And guess what I get? I get a lovely little, if the patient owes me money, if they haven't been in to visit me. So you can just tell them that you've heard Dr. Tai from Weave, and they sometimes give you a great break. Mention the word Elevate. I teach a program called Elevate, but it's a great program. They give you the phone system. They integrate into my software. The patient's entire information pops up as soon as the phone rings. I do my patient reviews with them. I do my phone appointments with them, and pretty much text, email, all that goodies. I love them for that. So there's a free endorsement for them. All right. Do you charge $500 per quadrant for MOPS? So great question. Let's talk about the $500. Look, I don't want to be greedy about this. I buy the product about $120, $140, and I'm going to do what? I'm going to charge for one quadrant. Why? Because from the insurance perspective, some of this comes out of the GP benefits. And if I have to do a cleaning or a crown or something else, I just ate up this $500 per quadrant for 4 quadrants. That's $2,000. Now, the insurance doesn't pay me that. Whether you're in network or out of network, you're getting maybe $160 to $200. You get 30 to 80 to 40% of that. So the patient has to pay the difference. So I can't go back to the patient and say, by the way, you're paying me for all 4 quads. Basically, I bill for 1 quad. I'm going to do all 4. I'm going to be nice to the patient. And it's a $500 fee in my practice. It covers their out-of-pocket expense for my insurance, as well as the other quads, but I'm not greedy in charging the insurance for all 4 quads. I know that some doctors and orthos do charge for all 4 quads. That's fine. I've taken it upon myself that, if I'm making a $300 profit on it, I'm happy with that. That's my formula, and it's worked great. How much is the Propel tool? Okay, so Marshall. So the Propel tool, which we call the accelerator, right over here, we have the accelerator itself. There's multiple different types. There is the actual one that is single use. That's the one you saw with my earlier uses that has a little light at 3 millimeters. You twist, and as soon as you hit the bone at 3 or at 5 millimeters, it has a little, where the arrow is, it tells you at what millimeters you're at. That is anywhere between 120, and it goes to the same with a reusable handle, which the tips are exposed, they're disposable, to this power driver, which a couple of grand for the power driver, but all the tips are typically about 120 bucks. And I know I'm not supposed to be quoting prices, but you guys can call Propel and find out. But I want to be very straight with you and telling you what I purchased it at. Now Align has 7-day protocol. Do you still do 5 days change? Propel, VPro, and do you do 3 or 4 day change? Your friend admire Stephanie. All right. So first of all, Align has the protocol for 7 day. Absolutely, Align's protocol 7 days good. In my practice, I'm doing 5 day for all patients that have been propelled. Just so you know, almost every one of my patients are going through Propel. Very seldom I'd rather have the patients pay for a retainer and pay for the retainer updates than me having to pay for and then for the retainers myself. So there's no value in the patient if we give a free retainer. They lose it. They expect another one. But if once they've paid $500 for a retainer, then guess what? They're never going to lose it, or they're going to think twice about it. However, if I'm if you saw in my price structure, that $500 is a choice of mine to give them the discount in that day, or they pay for the retainer. So the reality is 5-day change in my practice has been over 3 years now. That's what I've been doing using the Propel system. And the V Pro is an alternative because, again, if we're charging $500, it's either going to be for the mops or for the V Pro. I make the decision which way to go, but predominantly I'm a big mop guy. I love the mops. So I hope that helps you, Dr. Reinhardt, out there in Canada, and I'm glad you're listening. All right, to avoid placing attachment on crown. Yeah, I hate attachments on crowns. So, don't even think about it. Just tell your technician to get rid of that. And final question, with Propel patients, do you try to see them every 6 weeks, 6 aligners? So my formula was 6 weeks, 6 aligners. Because I'm on the road and I'm traveling and lecturing, I'm now 5 and 5 because it's easier. Teeth are moving really fast. As long as I'm bringing them back to make sure that there's no heavy contacts interproximally. Again, I want to make sure that these contact areas are light. And again, in this particular case, getting him done in 6 months required me to see him a little bit sooner. So 5 and 5 is my new formula. But I know in the past I've been preaching about 6 weeks, but that's 7-day change. If you're going to go 7-day change, it's a little slower than 6 weeks, 6 weeks, 6 weeks, and 6 aligners work. All right, I know we're at the top of the hour, 1 minute over. Man, I see questions coming in. I'll give you my contact information, and just so you know, my email is dr@atai.com. Just make sure you take your final quiz to get your CEs, and if you have additional questions, I'll be more than happy to answer you. And thank you for this hour. I hope you got something out of it, doctors. And again, doctor to doctor, peer to peer, I appreciate this hour you spent with me. Have a pleasant rest of the day.